So we'll be talking about go through some material, but I want to start with a competency model. So a competency model is typically a set of behaviors, skills, knowledge, abilities, etc., other aptitudes that might be critical to being successful in a certain field. And there are competency models for all kinds of different fields out there. You see a lot of them out there. A lot of them are based on something called a body of knowledge. This is the information that some competent person in this field should know. So think about a position that you might use. You'd hope that they have some competency there, etc. Typically, an organization will develop a competency model within a company, for example, and they'll use it to do performance planning. That'll help identify what sort of career assignments we want to make to an individual, what sort of training, other things that we might want to do. So want to get your feedback here. So people can say, what experience do you have with competence models? You haven't heard of them, you've heard of them, use them. I want to make sure my Menti's working, so I don't get any responses real quick. Okay, I'm going to go back and reset, make sure I'm good here. Okay, are you seeing the competency models in your? What? You're on question 3. Okay, well. Okay, well, we'll catch up with you on question 3 here. For whatever reason, it's not resetting properly. So how about just a show of hands? How many people haven't heard of a competency model before? Okay, new idea. How many people have heard about them but haven't really used one? Good. And how many people have used one before to judge competency? Okay, so this is something to really take advantage of in both in your career planning and just in general here. Okay. All right, so as an example, this is a competency model for NCOSE. Anybody seen this competency model before? It basically says, what does it mean to be a competent systems engineer? And it says there are really kind of 5 areas you would expect to master. There's some things they call core competencies, some things they call professional competencies, management competencies, technical competencies, and then a set of integrating competencies across the top. And there's a number of areas. And the way you use this kind of a model is you would consider your own skill set in each of these areas and judge kind of how strong you are and maybe reflect against how strong you need to be in that particular area. And so NCOSE has some more detail about each of those. There's a lot of detail, but basically there's a short description of the competency model. There's discussion of why this area might be important to you in your job. And then there are 5 levels of competency. You could be awareness, probably you're just out of school, you're just starting job, you have some idea of the involvement maybe from schoolwork, etc. Or you're a supervised practitioner. You could perform these activities, but you'd need somebody kind of looking over your shoulder and assisting you and correcting you. You're a practitioner, which means basically you could work without a lot of supervision. You're a lead practitioner, which means you can not only work without supervision, but you could probably supervise others. Or you're an expert, which means you're at these kind of conferences presenting these ideas. And you know, looking at an area like this, not every engineer would need to be competent in every particular area. So partly this is kind of looking at your own skill set and comparing how that might be. There's a software engineering competency model. Anybody seen the software engineering competency model before? Okay, so we're all at least software engineers. We ought at least be aware of it. It breaks it up a little differently. Now, again, these are competency models put together by industry experts, professional, typically teams of people that work for several months on these kind of things. And they talk about 5 basic areas. So they also have it broken into 5. And the SWECOM does it somewhat similar to NCOSI. They'll have typically a table of requirement skill sets and various activities that a competent person would be able to perform. And they'll define 5 levels again of competency, from being a technician to being entry level, a practitioner, a technical leader, or a senior software engineer. So again, depending on where you are in your career, you'd want to do this. Now, I did quite a bit of research. I didn't find any flight software engineering competency model. You might think about something that we might want to develop as an industry as guidelines to going forward. But I thought it would be useful for you to take a look at the two kind of together. And so I did kind of a meld of those two, and I'll present some ideas, and that'll hopefully give you some ideas in terms of where you want to go. So let's start with technical competencies. So you can see some that are in the SWECOM, some that are in the NCOSI. They'll have a number of charts that look kind of similar to this. I think technical competencies is probably an easy one for us. We often kind of focus on our technical competencies. It's the stuff we learned in school. It's the stuff we typically apply on a day-to-day basis. And that's probably appropriate, because if you're not technically competent, it's going to be tough to develop any other competency as well. It's going to be tough to probably just actually keep a job going. If there are areas that you're doing, that you're moving into, maybe you've been involved in one sort of activity like construction, but you haven't been involved in testing, or you don't really know enough about software quality, you could go to training classes. Especially these are the kind of broad boot camps or long training classes that can give you broad exposure to a number of technical competencies across the life cycle. Conferences are a good way to kind of get advanced topics here if you're working towards the light of those sort of skill sets. Or you could do some structured reading. Now, when I say structured reading, I don't mean reading a journal article like you would read a romance novel. What I mean is reading it with your highlighter out, underlining key parts, identifying areas that you want to go back and study deeper, et cetera. Something really where you're really trying to acquire knowledge, not just entertaining yourself with something that's fun to read about. So let's see, I don't think this one is working either, but we'll eventually get to one that is. So let's do this again by hands. Technical competence. So just ask yourself, give yourself an assessment of yourself. How do you think you might rate on some of these areas? How many people feel I'm probably good for the rest of my career? I've got the technical competencies that I think I should have. Okay, well, that's scary. How many people think I probably need some minor improvements? There's some areas I don't know about very well. Okay, how many people think I probably need some major improvements? Okay, how many people aren't sure and they need to go back and really look at some of the details to figure that out? And finally, one more not up here. How many people just don't like raising their hand about anything? Okay, at least I know where you are now. Okay, so give some thought. Technical competencies, that's something you might want to focus on. There's this area of core competencies, and I think that can be a challenge for us in flight software, because quite often we don't necessarily receive any kind of formal training in the core competencies. You might have taken a course in college on a program language or an operating system or something. Some of the systems engineering ones, I think these are all kinds of things that the folks we work with at JPL and NASA would consider like to be absolutely key things to being a competent practitioner in flight software engineering, but maybe things that you weren't just generally exposed to, okay? And I think the biggest problem is we just sort of underestimate the need for these things. System thinking, I kind of have an idea what that means. I don't really know how that applies to me, but I'm sure if there was a problem, somebody would come tell me, right? So again, something that I think you could look at in some of the same sort of things that you would use for the technical competencies, you could use to increase the core competencies. Okay, so conferences, training, structured readings, etc. These are pretty straightforward, and you pretty much could find classes on anything. You know, Caltech, for example, teaches courses on systems thinking. We teach courses on modeling and analysis. Okay, how about this one? Okay, well, now I'm really frustrated here. We'll just keep using hands, and I'm sorry we're not getting this. This is a very cool one. It works here, but how many people think their core competencies are probably okay as they are? How many people think they need some minor improvement? Okay. How many people think they need some major improvement? Okay. How many people don't know they really got to go look at some of these areas before they do? One of the reasons why I've handed out everything is give you a chance to go back and do additional research and look at some of these competency models and look at some of the details in these areas to really think about it. In a 45-minute presentation, it really just can kind of make you aware of the situation. I can't really give you detail enough to give you a pure assessment. Also, let me say that if you're a supervisor of flight software engineers, it would make sense to go off and talk to your and maybe use these competency models or something similar to assess the competencies of your team, and maybe use that to help them chart their career a little bit. It's a great mentoring tool. Okay, let's look at another area here, professional competencies. Again, I think we take for granted things like ethics and professionalism, but areas like technical leadership, that might be more difficult. A lot of these are what I would classify as soft skills. I don't like the term soft skills because I think they're some of the hardest things to develop. I will say that over my 40-year career, though, the places where my career was limited was not my technical knowledge. It was always my soft skills. I was smart, but I couldn't communicate my ideas, or I couldn't work effectively with a team to get them to implement my ideas, or I didn't have the emotional intelligence. That's a good one, right? We realize as engineers, we don't really have the strongest reputation for good emotional intelligence, right? Yeah. So typically, one out of every four flight software engineers has serious emotional intelligence problems. So look around the table. If it's not the other folks, it's probably you. So the trouble with these soft skills is it's something you can train on the basic knowledge of, but to really get good, you have to practice and you have to set up situations. And most of us don't like to practice skills development at work, right? We don't want to illustrate to somebody how weak we might be at something. This is why we need outside interests. So you can go to community interests or church, synagogue, temple, etc., and develop some of these skills in other kinds of meetings, etc. But for all these soft skills, I think you have to find a mechanism for practice. You have to figure out how you're going to practice these activities, and you develop these skills over time. People say, well, how do you develop skills to present? You know, you present at a lot of conferences. I say presenting is only tough the first 100 times you do it. After that, it gets really easy. So especially with new students, these are things to work on. There won't be lots of opportunities at work to develop these in a structured way. So you got to think about how you're going to continue to do that over your course of your career. Okay, same drill here, professional competencies. How many people think you're probably good as it is? I'm a professional, I probably got it. Okay, how many people think probably need some minor improvements? Okay, and some major improvements? How many people aren't sure? Okay, a couple aren't sure, and again, I'd suggest you go off to these models and take a little bit more look. Okay, management competencies. So these really show up in the INCOSE model. They don't really show up in the SWECOM in a similar way, although there's some discussion about leadership, but they actually kind of bin that under professional activities. Most flight software engineers consider their primary skills to be technical. In fact, they don't perceive management competencies as necessarily being relevant. We're getting ready to actually, we're teaching, one of my instructors is teaching a class at a group engineering organization, which shall remain nameless. But the sponsors that engaged Caltech to teach the course for them said, okay, well, we want a course on project management, but for God's sake, don't say the words project management. You know, we need to teach these technical leaders how to lead and manage things, but we really can't talk about it that way because in our company, those that can do and those that can't manage. And I think that's the perception in a lot of places. However, most organizations I know, to go very far up the ladder, often it requires management. And I will tell you, if you're trying to get your ideas implemented, if you're trying to do it all by yourself, your influence is really limited. It's the ability to work with a team, to lead a team. So maybe it's not traditional project management, but maybe it's team management. And understanding things like, well, what's the business case? And how am I going to work with the suppliers? And what risks and stuff have I created? Those are important. The other challenge, I think, is management skills are a practice skill. And so it's difficult sometimes to find opportunities to practice. If you're given a chance to manage a team and you do a really poor job, they just don't give you any more opportunities to do that. So again, this is an area where you might want to look outside of work for opportunities to manage other small teams, et cetera, or to do some kind of structured assignment or mentoring. Tiger teams, I think, is a great way to acquire new skills. By Tiger team, what I mean is a short duration team, maybe a few days to a few weeks, and get a chance to lead, get a chance to contribute. Often you're working in a brand new area. Nobody's really an expert, or there's only a couple of experts around and you need more staff on it. These can be kind of great chances because your exposure to management skills is limited, management challenges. And often the expectations are a lot smaller. Often what you're doing is not gambling with the company's bottom line profit, but just an advantage that they might be able to take. It's also a great place to be mentored. I had the distinct advantage in my career of being mentored by several really good managers. And every manager has their own style, and my style probably doesn't look like anybody else's. But I get a chance to see things that work. I got a chance to try things on. I got a chance to manage small teams and learn, hey, I'm never going to do that. Or this actually worked pretty good. Okay, management competencies. How many people think I'm good? I either never want to manage or I got this capability. How many people think I probably could make some more improvements? How many people think I probably need some major improvements? I really want to get involved. Yeah. So again, training, mentorship, that sort of thing. Anybody here not sure about management? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we pretty much know these kind of things, but technical management is quite different. Lots and lots of good articles out there on what it takes to manage. And I think it's a good point that managing flight software engineers is different. And managing in the type of environments and the type of companies that we work with is different. Managing using the types of technologies that we're using is different. So this is not like, you know, managing a Walmart. This is a very distinctive different thing. And luckily for us, most engineers say the skill that they most look for in their manager, according to surveys, is technical ability. So if you're a strong technical ability, you're going to win the trust of your team, or at least you'll have it initially until you blow it. Integrating competencies, again, it's in the in COSI, and it's kind of a catch-all for a bunch of things that we don't typically get skills in. I got through most of my career and didn't know very much about finance until I got in a position where I had to know a lot about finance, and then it was trial by fire. Logistics, one of those areas we might not have any involvement in, but you could get stuck in a position where the logistics was driving all of the performance and risk of the program. Okay, quality. Again, a lot of the same improvement strategies would work here. Again, I like being mentored. I like working with somebody I see competent. So if I have a competent finance person, I'm going to ask them, what is it you know? What is it you think I should know in my career? What do I have to understand? Often, as you get promoted, you get into a program management position, you get into a middle management position. All of a sudden, there's a number of things that you really need to know and be competent of. And so leaning on people that you already see as being competent in that area is a good one. Okay, this one actually looks like I've got a live link. I'm going to take a shot here. What? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Doesn't update. Okay. Yeah, so something about the hookup here isn't working right for us. So again, how many people think I'm good on integrating? How many people think I need some minor improvements? How about some major improvements? Okay, I don't knows. Okay, so I've noticed a number of you on the major improvements who put your hand up every time. Good for you. Good to recognize that there's areas that you need to develop. I think it's naive for us to think that somehow we're just going to magically acquire skills and knowledge and aptitude. I know in most of my career, I learned from the people I was working with. Some of those people weren't terribly competent at what they were teaching me. And most of them didn't make any explicit way to try to help me learn. So I think going off and being more explicit about it. Also, one thing I did do though was I tried to chart my career. Every 5 years or so, I didn't say, well, in 5 years, I'm going to be CEO. What I said was, here's an area I want to get into. And I realized I've got a gap in the knowledge I would have to be competent. Let me put together a specific plan to meet that gap. Okay. I'm going to take a course. I'm going to go attend a conference. I got into a whole new area because it looked interesting to me and I could see that was going to be a future direction. And I studied it and then took a major job on it, without a whole lot of background or skill, leaned heavily on the people that I knew in that organization that already knew that skill and was able to parlay that into the rest of my career. Okay, one area we haven't talked about is assessing our technology competencies and needs. So I think this is part of something you also ought to think about, specifically not just the fundamentals of being a flight software engineer, but being a flight software engineer in the next decade or the next 2 decades for some of you, maybe even longer, right? So I think you want to think about what are the technologies out there. And first of all, I think it comes with kind of knowing what you like and what you're good at. Are you happy doing what you're doing? And are you convinced that you're going to continue to be able to do that in the future? Well, that might be fine. Okay, and maybe I don't need to change. Am I in a domain that I feel is getting phased out? Okay. We go back 100 years and you were a blacksmith, you could probably see the handwriting on the wall. If any of you are sitting there thinking, I don't have to use AI, I'm never going to have to use that in my job. Okay, I would suggest that's probably not true. We're all going to need to use AI. I use AI tools on a daily basis, even in my largely management job. Okay, so I think about, do I want to stay where I am? Do I want to move? If you're going to stay where you are, or you're going to move in that domain, what are the driving technologies? So is artificial intelligence important? Yeah, I think we heard some really interesting topics about how it's affecting space, how it's already affecting space, and how it's likely to affect space. Data analytics to me is a big thing. If you don't know how to understand how to work with big data sets, with AI tools or with other kinds of tools, I think that's going to work. Autonomy, I think, is going to be continued important. By the way, I'll just weigh in and say, last week I took a Waymo car. I felt a lot more comfortable and safe than I do with most taxi drivers in LA. So just saying, I think that's going to be on top of us very quickly. Resilience, I think, is another one of those areas. I could probably make another long list. You probably could too of technologies. But in your area, what do you think it's? And then what areas do you need to increase your skills? And what type of area do you understand? Do you simply need to understand the basics? Could you get that by reading articles or just coming to conferences and listening to a panel like this? Do you need a deep dive? Do you really need to understand the methods used? Do you need to have competencies in the tools that implement those methods? Do you need to understand how you would apply this to product design? Do you need to read case studies or use cases on other people that have done it? Are you going to be leading that technology adoption for your organization? You need to know things about organizational change models in addition to the technology. Just saying we got a cool technology doesn't mean your company is going to be able to implement that. We do a lot of executive training at Caltech on how to implement new technologies. And I would say most executives somehow get to that level and don't really understand the basics of how do I bring in a new technology like artificial intelligence. We do a lot of workshops with those kind of companies to help executives and middle managements embrace those technologies, not just what is it, right? What is AI, but how would I use AI effectively in my organization? Where could we benefit? Is it worth the investment? How fast do we get into it? What are the first steps that we need to take? Lots and lots of things there. So I think that's a whole area. I'll kind of end the last section sort of talking about AI a little differently here. And kind of two questions here. And the first, I think, is how is flight software engineering different with AI components? Okay. So if I put an AI component in a flight software system, ground, space, whatever, how is that going to be different? And then how would AI change the way in which I do flight software engineering? Would I design differently given AI tools? Would I test differently? Okay. And I think it's a huge area. There's a lot of things that we could talk about. I'm going to point people towards a larger presentation that I did on this, where I kind of explored all these areas in a lot more detail. If you're interested in that, see me at break, hand me a business card. I'll make sure you get a copy of that presentation. But just as an example, how is flight software engineering different with AI components? Well, first of all, I think traditional systems, there's predefined rules and behaviors. We know how to characterize an existing system. There might be corner conditions or other conditions that we might do, but the responses are basically predictable, or they're stochastically predictable in some sort of way. A system that has AI components, right, especially if there's some sort of machine learning, they're going to adapt and change their behavior over time based upon new data and new understandings that the AI systems gain, right? That's going to introduce a lot of dynamic and unpredictable behavior. And so we've got to set up systems to do that, to account for that, to put guardrails up on where things could learn, et cetera. I think I would refer you to, we had a JPL speaker at the panel. There's a lot of good JPL AI application work online. We have guest AI speakers in our AI classes from JPL, and they're just doing some really fascinating things, but it wasn't straightforward. They learned over time how to work with, how to do engineering differently given an unpredictable AI component. Same thing goes true for testing. Things go through for performance and scalability. Other side of the question, how is AI changing the way? How many people here have used ChatGPT at least once? Okay. How many people use ChatGPT on a weekly basis? How many use ChatGPT on a daily basis? How many people use some AI-powered tool for engineering different than ChatGPT or similar tools? Okay, so you can see a lot of people are already embracing this, and it really is a game changer in terms of productivity, in terms of performance, et cetera. Really want to consider people doing this. And there's all kinds of things that you can read about online here, like in requirements analysis and management. Just to give you an example, we can now do a lot of interpretation of documentation and stuff with natural language processing. And we can extract things like requirements from mission descriptions, from other sorts of things. We have some of our instructors playing with tools that can actually generate model-based systems engineering models based on just a query with some of the stakeholders involved, pull out all the requirements from them. Some really things. We can do things like automate traceability and stuff with tools. So there's lots of different ways. With that said, lots of other skills to consider. And again, point you towards that. There's a wonderful article on system engineering competencies for base system program managers. If management's in your career, I would encourage you to go look at that. So let me just close by saying, I hope this has motivated you to go into this topic a little deeper, go off and do some research, go do a self-assessment. You're in charge of your own destiny. So first of all, know yourself. What do you enjoy doing? What do you think you're going to be doing in the future? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Assessing where the gaps are between where you need to be in the future, where you are now. And finally, I think we all need to be lifelong learners. Seek knowledge is not only in classes, but on the job, in relationships you have, and with mentoring. And with that, I'm finished with my remarks, and I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Yes, we do. Give it up for Rick. Questions?
While he's moving over the microphone here, also pointing out, if you're interested in going on farther in artificial intelligence, there's some flyers I put in the back right-hand corner of the room here on some of our AI classes. And if you're interested, just go ahead and pick one up.
Sorry. Hello. Thank you for giving this presentation to us, to our software community. So the flight software community in the country and probably around the world is not very large. A lot of the people here are working on lots of projects that are going on. So in trying to develop sort of our skill set and sort of our knowledge base, education is super critical, and professional education is super critical. So my question is about the Caltech Management Association. In Southern California, if I want to improve myself, I would take a class at potentially UCLA Extension, which offers a great set of classes. My question is, will Caltech or the Caltech Management Association or the Caltech Education expand their course offerings so people locally in Southern California benefit from the expertise that resides within Caltech itself?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So this isn't a sales pitch for Caltech, but just to answer the question, the center is Caltech's professional training arm and executive training arm. And so on the flyer, you've got our information. It's also in your handout here. If you go there, you'll see about 50 different classes that we do for professionals. They're all designed around professional schedules. Our specialty is really custom building courses for organizations. So we built courses for about 50 different companies a year of different sorts, very specific. We can include very specific organizational challenges like that. So yeah, we have similar courses to most of the universities you name. I think a lot of people get confused about professional training and think, I've got to go get a master's in something or a PhD in something. For most of us, that's not practical. We don't want to make that commitment. We don't want to pay that kind of money. And that's not really what we're going. We're after a particular body of knowledge. We're after a particular skill set that we can get by practicing in class. And so I think look into the professional training. And again, flyers back there, pick it up, or I'll be happy to talk with you later about opportunities. But yeah, that's what the Caltech Center for Technology and Management Education is really all about.
We can take one more question. I don't have anything online.
Hello. What are your thoughts about AI, like ChatGPT, on skills? So I might think I don't need a skill about finance because I can just ask ChatGPT.
Yeah. So I think the real skill is looking at ChatGPT results and separating fact from fiction. Okay. By the way, it's very interesting. AI is really revolutionizing the training industry as well. For example, in most of our courses, we put like an AI-based training aid that if you're a student in the class, you can ask a ChatGPT-like engine questions about the course. It's going to point you back towards course material. It's going to show you other case studies. It's basically like having a mentor. Good examples, I think, are when AI systems act like really smart assistants that can help you find information, can help you focus your question in a proper way. We're always going to need knowledge. We're always going to need domain knowledge. To me, it's similar to a problem we had maybe going back 10 years ago with search engines, right? You could find lots of information. And I know my kids were always confused. Well, Dad, the internet says this, right? Like, you know, you got to develop skills on figuring out what's really correct and what's really not. Same thing with ChatGPT. And I don't think that's going to get fixed completely. It'll get better, but I don't think it'll get fixed completely. So I think you always need that domain-specific knowledge, that context-specific knowledge. Yeah, that's a good idea, but in my case, I've seen several great presentations at the conference already where people said, here's a set of rules, and we got looking at the situation, we decided something else was going to work better. And so I think you still need that. You still need the creativity. We're still designers at heart. So yeah, I think there'll be a tremendous assistant. Right? I can remember, I'm old enough to know when people used to debate whether we should use calculators. Well, if you use calculators, no one's going to be able to divide by longhand. Who divides by longhand anymore? Right? It's a great aid. Doesn't mean that you believe all the answers that come out of the calculator. I think AI engines will be the same way.
All right.